Welcome to Conversations in Higher Education, where collaboration meets innovation. I'm John Myer on behalf of Rackspace Technology here at EDUCAUSE in Nashville. We're sitting down with leaders who are transforming higher education. Today's conversations, it's about what matters most, building trust, empowering students, and creating the future of learning. Joining us today is Charron. Charron, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Charron, let's kick things off. With the top 10 initiatives of EDUCAUSE is all about restoring trust in higher education. Why is that a challenge today?
I think it's a challenge for a lot of different reasons. I think young people today are looking for different things out of higher education that perhaps the establishment hasn't actually prioritized. So they're thinking about flexibility. They're thinking about, how is this going to translate into a career for me? Is it, what the priorities that they have? And so I think it's a challenge because there's a difference in not only kind of like the generational differences around priorities and what should be important and why you should pursue higher education. But then I think there's also this, the cliff we have around, is higher education even important? And so how do you have that conversation with someone where you're trying to basically sell them on your product when they don't think it has value at all? And I think that's a very challenging place to be. So it'd be like someone trying to sell you a cell phone and you're like, I don't need a cell phone, I have a landline, so I'm not even interested in this conversation. So how do we even get past that piece, that dissonance between there's actually value here and how they are not valuing it? So I think it's a really challenging time for folks all across the higher education.
Ron, the other thing is requiring that secondary education, that certification that you went to school. Is now the challenge that comes up is it worth me going to school versus doing a trade?
Correct. And again, that's where we have to kind of have that conversation around, we think this is valuable because when we were growing up and when we went to school, it was pretty much guaranteed that you could get a job if you got that degree. You would make more money than, say, someone who graduated from high school only. And nowadays, that is not the case. And so we are seeing our young people, our students, so we're saying, is this actually worth it to invest in? Because is it an investment? It's quite expensive, even our lower cost options, community college and things like that. Is it worth investing in this? Because am I going to get the return on it? And so having those conversations and being willing to address that, as higher education institutions.
Speaking more of challenges, what do you believe are the biggest leadership challenges for CISOs in higher education right now?
I think right now, I'll say two. One on the personal side of being a security leader, and then one on the side of like the institution itself. On the security side, the leader itself, I think one of the biggest challenges is the focus on individual responsibility. So you're no longer protected as part of an institution. So if you make the wrong decision around, how you handle an incident or a breach or how you notice people because of the data involved with it, if you don't do that well or right or perfect, you could be at risk of the federal government coming after you, after individuals coming out after you from a legal perspective, going to prison. We've seen cases now where CISOs have been actually prosecuted for the decisions that they made, and they have not come under the protection of the institution. So I think that is a huge change, a shift, and it's concerning, but it's also something that we really have to be aware of and we take our jobs very seriously, but we need to take them even more seriously because there are repercussions. I think on the other side of the house, one of the big challenges is how do we protect our universities? How do we protect the data and the systems, but still remain open? Because one of the goals usually is how do we educate, the community? How do we share resources? Like that's a higher education goal. And when you're a security professional, you're trying to keep everything closed and keep it protected. And so it's that balance. And so I think that is a big challenge now because we really want to be more open, more transparent with our customers, the students, and with the community about why we're so beneficial, but we also want to protect ourselves. So I think that's a big challenge and something we have to kind of balance.
There has to be a fine line of transparency, not only between the student,
yes,
but the institution and what they're doing with the student's data.
Yes.
I would go out on a limb and say years ago, we weren't as concerned about our data when handling it and giving it to an institution. And I think the next generation is more aware of what data we're handing an institution. What are they doing with it?
Yes.
Where is that information going? And is it going outside of the institution that the student does not? It's more like you own your data now,
Yeah.
which allows you to do more with it and decide what institution to do it. And the transparency of an institution clearly stating what I can and can't do with the data and where it's going really holds them accountable.
Yeah, we live in a world now where data is the business. It doesn't matter what your business is, data is your business. So, we think about like appliance manufacturers, the person who makes your refrigerator. They're not an appliance business. They're a data business because all that data that they're collecting through that touch screen where you can put your grocery list in.
How often are they buying milk?
You're watching a YouTube video about it. So so the data is now the business. And that is something that I think our young people really recognize. And like you said, they're taking control and saying, if my data is the business, I want to control it then. I want to be the one who decides where you share it, who you share it with, how long you share it, all of those good things. And so I think as institutions, we have to be mindful of it. Again, that data is a business. I'll just give you a quick example. We had a vendor who was coming in and they were going to do our process for calling out names at graduation. And so there was a set of data points that they wanted. And when we were reviewing the data points as the security office, we noticed that they were asking for things like gender identity, and they were asking for things like birth date. And so flags go up. Why do you need that to call out
their name?
Sharon is walking across the stage? I don't need all of that.
Received a bachelor's in computer science or something.
But data is a business, and we are prime, land for getting data, lots of data on people who are going into and going to be the consumers of tomorrow. And so we have to be very mindful of the fact that we are being targeted by these vendors and these companies to get as much data out of us as we can. And so we have to be aware of it. We have to make sure that we put policies and processes in place that protect our students' data, that protect our institutions' data, that our staff are aware that these types of things are happening so that they can be mindful when they're reviewing and vetting things. But again, it's like data is the business. And so we have a lot of it. People want it. And so how do we put things in place to protect ourselves and our students? It's very important.
But how do you balance not only the data, right? So as a student, you're providing all this information, but doing the most you can with the least amount of information and data, but still giving the same experience to a student?
Yeah. I think that's, again, that balance. And that's where data governance, I know people don't like to talk about governance. That's a bad word sometimes because you think like bureaucracy and it's going to hold things up. But that's where that data,
accountable.
Yeah. Well, and it's also coming up with those, what do we need to do? What are we trying to do here? And what's the least amount of data that we need to make that happen, and having that governance in place that's saying, like I said, like, why do you need date of birth for this particular process? You don't. Okay, we have guidelines in place to say we don't give you that for this particular situation. So I think having that data governance in place is really critical so people understand how to use the data, who to share it with, again, timelines around it. When are we, needing to retain that data for how long? All of those things are, I think, maybe things that we weren't always thinking about or had at top of mind. And now it has to be. It has to be like it's one of the base things that we have to do as part of our business.
Charron, where do you see some of the biggest efficiency gaps in higher education that still need innovation?
Oh, there's so many. But I think that we could do a lot better at our processes for onboarding our students, making that user experience of you're a brand new student to our institution. How do you get access to everything you need to get access to? How do you...
Without going through so many hoops. Oh, you got to go to this screen, this program.
Yeah, you got to log into this other thing. I'm with this.
It's a lot of friction that nobody wants.
It's a lot of friction.
Then there's data in multiple places too.
Yes, and that is a big challenge, again, around. And so you think about things like identity and how people want to be, the name they want to be used to address them, their gender identity, all of those things. If folks have a lot of different systems, then it can be falling through the cracks. So it may be you're doing it super good during their onboarding, their initial orientation. It's in your main systems, but then they're going to the College of Engineering and they got their own system. And all of a sudden their preferred name isn't listed there. So they're going in and they're meeting with the professor and they're being called something that they did not want to. So I think we could do a lot better, again, onboarding folks, making sure that that data is flowing through, making sure that people's preferences are established. Because again, I know people sometimes don't like to think about it, but the students are our customers. They are the reasons why we exist and why we can continue. And so making sure that they are taken care of and that they're experiencing our campuses in the way that we want them to, or that they want to, is very important. And we need to prioritize that.
You brought up another good point, is transferring to another one is data sharing.
Yes.
There has to be some guidelines in place. The student has to authorize that, but what data gets to go to this other campus? What information is going over? Do I want all of it or just a little bit and I'll fill in the rest myself?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's not even just with, sharing out to other campuses. We had an instance where it was alumni data. So our alumni institution is completely separate from our university. And so we're sharing information with them. We're like, oh, you're the alumni. But then it's like, well, wait, did our students give us permission to share that information? That is an external entity. So that, again, I think is as people are starting to really, truly understand how critical data is and how it can be leveraged both for good and for bad, we're starting to say, oh, okay, this use case, we need to have talks about this. We need to have governance around this and make decisions and have the student's voice be part of that. That's really important. I try to meet with we have what we call a student tech council, and we try to meet with them at least once a year, if not more, to talk about, okay, what are you all experiencing? What are some concerns you have around technology, security, that type of thing, so that their voices are part of the conversation? Because it's great we're having the conversations, but if their voices aren't there, we may be missing the mark. Yeah.
So Ron, my last question for you is, how do you balance innovation with the process discipline needed for long-term support?
It's challenging, but I think it is prioritizing. Everybody talks about like innovating and kind of like moving at the speed of light. Higher education is in a tricky situation where we're leveraging technology to do everything that we need to do, but we're not really funded in a way that speaks to that kind of ongoing innovation and kind of like moving quickly. And so we have to be mindful of like picking where we innovate and picking where we put our resources so that we are not innovating in a way that we can't sustain and we can't support. And so I think that that's important, to just kind of pick and choose your areas of innovation.
Exactly. Charron, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks to Charron for sharing her insights with us. I'm John Myer here at EDUCAUSE. Until next time.